Right now, everyone across the United States is supposed to stay home because of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. I've been staying home just like everyone else, trying to avoid getting infected. So far, things have been going well. I haven't caught the virus, nor has anyone I know. Being stuck at home, though, has reminded me of the last time an elected official ordered everyone in the place where I live to stay home. Back in 2015, I was living in a small town in northeastern Wisconsin called Gainesfield. My girlfriend Jess and I moved to the town in November 2014, shortly after same-sex marriage was legalized in Wisconsin through Wolf v. Walker. Same-sex marriage was still illegal at the time in Michigan, where we had been living previously and we wanted to get married. And so we moved to this town that was only a few hours drive from the town in Michigan that we were living before, and where my parents were still living. We got married and we found jobs in the town. We even bought a small house on the outskirts of town. Our lives were looking really good. And then for some reason on April 5th, the mayor of the town we had moved to issued a decree ordering everyone in the whole town to remain in their homes for a full 24 hours. Lasting from 1 p.m. on April 30th to 1 p.m. on May 1st. The mayor's statement warned that dangerous, radioactive materials would be transported through the town during those hours for a new factory that was being built and that they didn't want anyone getting hurt. The decree was printed on the front page of the town's newspaper. Posters with the decree were put up all over the town and all of the public buildings. The decree was even read aloud on the local radio station every 15 minutes. As soon as the decree was issued, though, everyone started questioning it. Why do they have to seal off the whole town? Jess asked when we first heard about the news. I don't know, I said. You would think that instead of telling everyone in the whole town to stay inside, they could just tell everyone which roads they're going to be transporting the radioactive materials on and block off those roads. Also, I'm not an expert on radioactive materials or anything, but I'm pretty sure they can transport radioactive materials safely without even needing to seal off any roads at all, she added. I'm pretty sure they have special trucks that can transport radioactive materials in. You're right, I said. Nothing about this adds up. The very next day after the mayor's decree came out, the police department issued their own announcement declaring that they would be strictly enforcing the mayor's decree, and that they would shoot anyone they caught out of their home during the period when the stay-at-home order was in effect on the spot without questioning. Everyone in the whole town was absolutely shocked by this development. We really had no idea what to make of it. Jess and I had really only been living there for a few months, so we didn't know much about what the town was like. But I talked to people who had been living there longer, and they all told me that no order like this had ever been given at any point in their entire lives. They were all just as baffled as I was. In the days that followed, several people I knew tried to contact the state government and the national press about what was going on, hoping that they would do something to stop whatever the mayor was doing. Strangely though, neither the state government nor the press ever responded. In fact, it seemed almost impossible to spread news about the stay-at-home order to people outside of the town at all. If someone posted the stay-at-home order on social media, their post mysteriously got taken down. If someone wrote a blog post about the stay-at-home order, their blog post got mysteriously deleted. Only the local newspaper and other publications that were exclusively disseminated locally seemed to be able to discuss the stay-at-home order at all. For weeks, town officials kept reiterating the seriousness of what was going on, reminding everyone that, whatever they did, they absolutely needed to stay indoors from 1 p.m. on April 30th to 1 p.m. on May 1st. They told us that it would be extremely dangerous to leave our homes during this time and that, even if we heard strange noises coming from outside, it was imperative that we do not leave our homes. Eventually, the fateful day of April 30th came. A police officer came by our house that morning at around 9 a.m. to remind us that after 1 p.m., we weren't allowed out of our house and that if we did go out of our house, we would be shot. I didn't know what to say, so I just thanked the officer and told him that I would make sure not to leave during the lockdown. Shortly after 1:30 p.m., I started hearing strange noises coming from the street outside. I heard marching, people chanting loudly in some strange tongue, the clanging of bells, and all sorts of animal sounds, but when I looked out of the window, I saw absolutely nothing. "Liz, do you hear all those weird noises coming from the street?" Jess asked, coming down the stairs, confirming to me that the sounds were real and I wasn't just crazy. "Yeah," I replied. "I definitely hear them. When I look out the window though, there's no one there." We sat together in silence for about 15 to 20 minutes, listening to the frightening noises coming from outside. The sound seemed to slowly grow louder as we were sitting there. By this point, I was getting really freaked out by all of this. I could feel myself starting to break out into a cold sweat. I started thinking about going outside to see what was going on. I started to walk towards the door. Jess grabbed my arm to stop me. "Don't," she whispered. "I'm just gonna open the door and look out. I won't actually step outside. They never said we weren't allowed to peek out through the door," I told her. I went to the door, quivering. I put my hand on the handle. I paused for a moment, afraid of what I might see if I looked out. After hesitating for about a minute, I turned the handle and I pulled the door open. I looked out through the open doorway and saw, to my horror, a sight that I had definitely not seen through the window. There was a whole parade of people heading through the street. They were marching on foot in rows of 3 at a relatively slow but steady pace. These weren't normal people though. They were all dressed in black robes with hoods covering their faces. Some of them were leading livestock like goats, sheep, and cows. Others were ringing bells. All of them were chanting in that strange foreign tongue. I'm still not sure what language they were chanting in, but I think it may have been Latin or ancient Greek or something like that. I motioned for Jess to come over to the door to see what I was seeing. "There's a parade of some kind," I told her, "but it looks like some sort of occult parade. For some reason, we couldn't see it through the window." Timidly, she crept over to the door. Standing alongside me, she looked out and gasped at the sight before us. "They must be occultists," she whispered. "There must be millions of them, filling all the streets all over the city." We watched as they moved past for about half an hour. There seemed to be no end to this massive parade of black-robed, hooded figures until, at long last, the end of the procession came into view. "They look like they're all heading for the center of town," Jess observed. "I wonder what they might be doing there." I stuck my head out of the door and peered over to see where the parade was going. I looked around to make sure that there were no police officers hanging around to shoot me. Seeing none, I stepped out onto our front porch so I could see where the parade was going. "Liz, be careful," Jess warned. "Remember what the police have warned." "I doubt anyone is going to shoot us for just going out on our own porch," I said. "Besides, there are no officers in sight." I looked down the street to the place where all the robed figures seemed to be headed. I still couldn't see what they were doing. "I'm just gonna walk a bit over that way," I said, stepping off the porch and onto the lawn. Jess followed after me somewhat timidly. The hooded figures who were already past our house seemed to take no notice of this. We crept along as stealthily as we could, following after the long procession of cloaked figures. We followed them for about a quarter mile until the square in the center of town came into view. The square was absolutely massive. I had always wondered why such a small town needed such a huge town square. Now with all the cloaked figures crowding into it, I was starting to realize the reason why. In the center of the square, there is a giant obelisk carved with writing in some ancient script that stood on top of a raised platform. The obelisk was supposedly a monument to all the people from the town who had died in the World Wars. I'd always thought that monument was a bit weird, but now with all the occultists gathering around it, the obelisk was starting to seem downright sinister. There were also police officers standing around everywhere, armed to the teeth, ready to shoot anyone they caught outside of their homes. Jess and I hid around the corner of a building about 100 yards from the town square, so we were close enough that we could see what was going on, but far enough away, hopefully, the police officers wouldn't notice us. I noticed that the mayor was standing on the raised platform in front of the obelisk, wearing some kind of ritual regalia. He was wearing a purple robe with this weird apron thing over it that had symbols all over it. He had a big necklace with a huge amulet attached to it. I couldn't make out what the amulet was exactly from the distance at which we were standing, but it looked really creepy. He was holding a blazing torch in his left hand, and in his right hand, he was holding a book. Suddenly, all of the cloaked figures stopped chanting. Those who had bells stopped clanging their bells. Even all the animals fell silent. The crowd of cloaked figures stood silent and motionless. We stood there and waited in complete and utter silence for about 20 minutes. I don't know how Jess and I managed to keep quiet that long. After waiting for what felt like ages, the mayor suddenly began to speak. He didn't speak in English, but rather in some strange foreign language. Once again, I'm pretty sure that it was an ancient language, but I'm not an authority on ancient languages, so I don't know exactly which one it was. As the mayor was speaking, a cloaked figure came forward holding a skull and a glass bottle full of a red liquid. The mayor handed his torch and his book to another cloaked figure and took the bottle. He continued speaking as he poured the red liquid all over himself, drenching himself in it. It really looked like he was bathing in blood, but I'm not entirely sure if that's really what he was doing. Next, he took the skull and he placed it before the obelisk. The mayor stopped speaking and took a knife from a pocket in his apron. The cloaked figure brought forth a goat. The mayor took the knife and slit the goat's throat over the skull, spilling the goat's crimson blood all over the skull and all over the ground. As the mayor was doing this, the cloaked figure who was now holding the book began to read aloud from it. Of course, he read aloud in that strange, incomprehensible foreign tongue. As the person was reading, flames started to spring up all around the raised platform on which the mayor was standing. The other cloaked figures began to sing in their bizarre language as the cloaked figure beside the mayor continued to read aloud and the flames continued to spread. The flames grew higher and higher, and then a menacing face appeared in the flames. A demonic face with piercing eyes and a malevolent grin that haunts my nightmares to this very day. The demon face began to speak, and that's when I decided that this was enough. I slid back around the corner of the building and motioned for Jess to follow me, and I started back towards our house, going as quickly yet stealthily as I could. We broke out into an all-out run as soon as we thought that we were out of earshot. As soon as Jess and I got back to the house, we started making plans to move out of Wisconsin. We weren't sure exactly what we had seen, but it was disturbing enough that we decided the safest thing to do was to get out of the state as soon as possible. Within a couple of days, we were moving in with my parents who were still living in the same town in the UP of Michigan, where I had grown up, and where we had been living until we had decided to move to Wisconsin. In June 2018, I had tried to look up information about Gainesfield, Wisconsin, thinking that maybe I would find some information about the town's history that would help me understand what I had seen. Bizarrely though, I couldn't find anything about the town at all online. I couldn't even find the town itself on Google Maps. It was like the town had just totally ceased to exist. Jess and I went back to visit the town, hoping that we would be able to find some records in the town archive or something that might help us to understand. When we got to where we remembered the town being, though, There was nothing there. The whole town was just gone. We visited some of the neighboring towns and talked to some of the people there. None of them had ever heard of a town in Wisconsin called Gainesfield. They all thought that we were out of our minds. I still don't know what to make of this. I don't know what happened to the people who were living in that town. I don't know what happened to the town itself. All I know is that these things I've experienced are sufficiently disturbing that I think the world really needs to know about them. I'm writing this now in the hope that this post won't get deleted. I want this post to serve as a record for the world about what happened to that town. As far as I know, no one but Jess and I made it out before the town disappeared, so we may be the only ones in the world who can attest to its existence.